And joining us now with more on the developments of this past week, from U.S. President Trump's statements on Iran to Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Washington to the hostages releases, is Colonel Miri Eisin, Senior Fellow at the International Institute for Counter-Terrorism. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
So it seems Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Washington was a major success, with a new president in the White House that sees eye to eye with Israel on nearly every major issue. Stark contrast to the last administration, perhaps. What's your take on Netanyahu's visit? Did he truly achieve his goals in Washington?
I think he achieved every single one of them. He literally dotted the I's and crossed the T's. That means that he met not just with the president, and as he stated, he is on the same page. That doesn't mean we all agree with that, but they both agree completely on the way that they're going to approach both, I would say, the Gaza-Hamas problem. Take note that they didn't talk about the Palestinian issue, rather the Gaza-Hamas problem, about the Iranian nuclear issue needs to be taken care of and how that needs to be done. And in general, not just in meeting the president, the prime minister met all of the different Congress, both House and Senate, and that is a big, important step for any Israeli to feel the backing of the United States of America at this time. We do not feel like we have the backing around the world, and I think we all feel it right now.
Absolutely. And, I want to talk about one of the major issues on the table, Iran. President Trump last night making an interesting statement on the Islamic Republic of Iran. He has somewhat changed his tune, and where he's previously called on Israel to bomb Iran's nuclear sites, now he's saying he prefers a diplomatic agreement. So I'll remind our viewers that Trump pulled out of the JCPOA. So, what kind of deal would we expect to take shape now? And is Israel really on board with the diplomatic approach?
So a deal means a diplomatic approach. A deal means dialogue. And most of those who opposed at the time the JCPOA was more because of what it had in it. I'm not against a deal. I'm against a deal that makes sure not only that they don't have nuclear weapons, but a lot of the platforms themselves. Because if Iran becomes what we call a nuclear threshold country, meaning they're almost there, but not quite there, that's very scary for me if they have the capabilities that they would go across the threshold and immediately be able to set that together with a platform, with something that would fire it against Israel. So it's not just looking only at the nuclear capability, it's also looking at the platforms. Over the last few weeks, Iran has been doing a show. I can only show it, the theater of Iran, of all of the different type of platforms that they're developing, of ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, of different types of drones and UAVs, and you look at all of those and go, what's the message Iran is trying to say? So I do think that dialogue and arriving at a deal is good. I don't want us to look at a deal that only addresses that specific nuclear aspect. That was the problem also then. It's also about the platforms.
Mm-hmm. And this is an historic opportunity to rid the world of the Islamic regime. It's the greatest state sponsor of terrorism beyond, of course, its nuclear ambitions, and also to liberate the people of Iran. So, why would the U.S. and Israel specifically give up on this sort of historic opportunity to overthrow the regime, which is at its weakest today? Because as long as the mullahs are there in power, there can't really be peace in the Middle East.
Not just in the Middle East, but here I'm not going to push back. I'm just going to say, for the benefit of all those watching, I do not know of any place in the world where an outside power has changed what you have, the domestic politics inside. Anytime a coup has come from the outside, and it doesn't matter if it's an outer attack that would change it on the ground, it has to come from within. Otherwise, both the different mullah leaders inside at a lot of different levels are going to be able to push back. So in this case, it's kind of like, what do the people of the Islamic regime of Iran want? We like to hear the voices of those who totally oppose the mullahs. We're not going to highlight the ones that support the mullahs. And I'm just going to say right now, at this very turn-changing point in the Middle East, Just like I'm a little wary of what's happening right now inside the new regime of Syria, which is not all good news for Israel, I also think that sometimes we have to listen to the voices in Iran that are against mullahs, that they want something different, but it isn't necessarily going to bring us what we want, which is peace in the Middle East. So I breathe in deep. I need the Iranians to change Iran, and I want to hope that when they change it, it'll be to something that we can all enjoy and not to something even worse.
And now, a word about Hamas. We saw the horrific state of the 3 hostages released on Saturday. There are still 73 more hostages, many of them in dire need of medical attention. Now, both Netanyahu and Trump reiterating this week and on Saturday that Hamas needs to be destroyed. So how does this align with the ongoing negotiations now for phase 2?
We all need the hostages. There is no way to get the hostages without negotiations. I think we can all say that clearly after 16 months. The question here is the price, both the price that we're paying when we are giving out the Palestinian prisoners. I'll say up front, it's a price we don't feel as much. The one that you're stepping upon is, what does that mean about Hamas ruling after? Hamas understand that not Israel, not the United States, but more importantly, none of the other stakeholders in the Middle East are willing for Hamas to be the ruler afterwards. So it really comes down to what will Hamas be afterwards, because they're not going to rule over the Gaza Strip. And in this one, I don't have an answer. It has to do with what Israel does, with what the United States under President Trump will do, not just say, and especially what the Palestinians, both in Judea and Samaria, but also the impact of Saudi Arabia, of Egypt, the borders, the Gaza Strip, of those outer stakeholders, how they are going to hold both the Palestinians and Hamas accountable. And I know I said a lot of different things here right now. It isn't a given that Israel is going to go in and destroy all of the rest of Hamas's terror capabilities. But let's look at those pictures. Those are not terror capabilities. Those are terror theatrics. It's the little things that are there to really impact us psychologically, and they do. But they don't have the capability now not to do an October 7th attack, not to do that type of atrocity at the time, and we need to make sure that that's the way it is, that they cannot do so.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a very tumultuous week, lots of issues on the table, but also a lot of potential. Colonel Miri Eisin, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thank you all so much.